For those of you that would be regular attenders of PCC, you know that this year our theme has been the greater story. And it's been wonderful to hear the testimonies of our faith family and how God is beautifully and masterfully writing each story. We've heard amazing stories of redemption and restoration, stories of salvation and grace. Today, we didn't have a greater story because we simply want to talk about one story today. We want to talk about the greater story of Jesus. And as we celebrate his story, we also get to celebrate the reality that the resurrection didn't just rewrite the story of Jesus. It's still rewriting ours. On Friday, the story of Jesus to most people appeared to come to an end. He was crucified on the cross, wrapped in grave clothes, placed in a borrowed tomb, and a stone was set in place. But on the third day, the resurrection rewrote his story. Jesus walked out of the grave, and the stone was not rolled away so that Jesus could get out. The stone was rolled away so that we could see in and see the story continues. And when the resurrected Jesus walked out of the tomb, he not only began to rewrite his story, but he immediately began to rewrite the story of those that he loved, including a disciple named Peter. And just as Jesus rewrote Peter's story, he's doing the same thing today in our lives. Shortly after the sun rose on that first Easter morning, some women arrived at the tomb carrying spices to anoint what they thought was the dead body or the corpse of Jesus. But instead they were greeted by angels. I'd love to read together with you from Mark chapter 16, beginning in verse number 5. Mark chapter 16 and verse number 5. And if you don't have a Bible, we'll have the words behind me. Mark 16:5 says this: as they entered the tomb, they saw a young man dressed in a white robe sitting on the right side, and they were alarmed. Don't be alarmed, he said. You are looking for Jesus the Nazarene who was crucified. He has risen. He is not here. See the place where they laid him? Verse 7. But go, tell his disciples and Peter, he is going ahead of you into Galilee. There you will see him just as he told you. Okay, so this is a miraculous moment, right? These women expected to encounter a silent tomb of death, and something was alive. An angel of the Lord was sitting there, an angel of light, and this angel gives these ladies a message and then says, and I also have a message for you to deliver. Go and tell his disciples and Peter that he's going to meet you in Galilee just as he told you. Now, that phrase, just as he told you, is very important to the story. In fact, I want to show you, if you would flip back just 2 chapters in Mark chapter 14, you'll see where Jesus makes this statement. Mark chapter 14, and we're going to look at 2 verses beginning in chapter 27. So what we're about to read took place at the Last Supper when he's warning his disciples of the terror to come, but they don't get it. They can't understand the weight. It's the same conversation when Jesus tells Peter, you're going to deny me 3 times. And Peter's like, that'll never happen. Right? But Jesus also mentions these instructions about Galilee. Look at verse number 27. Jesus says, you will all fall away. Jesus told them, for it is written, I will strike the shepherd and the sheep will be scattered. But after I have risen, I will go ahead of you into Galilee. So those words right there that Jesus speaks to his disciples before his death, that's why the angels say, go tell his disciples and Peter that he's going to meet you in Galilee just as he told you. Okay, so let's take that and let's go to the end of Resurrection Day. Flip with me to John chapter 20, would you? John chapter 20. So we know Jesus has said, go meet us in Galilee. We know the angels told the ladies to go deliver a message to the disciples, go meet us in Galilee. And on the day of the resurrection, there's a flurry of activity as people run back and forth to the tomb. We read that Jesus reveals himself to some people, but by the end of Resurrection Day, Jesus is going to meet his disciples. He's going to tell them to touch me. He's going to eat in front of them so that he could prove it's really him. And they were just so excited. John chapter 20, look at verse number 19. John chapter 20, verse number 19. It says, on the evening of that first day of the week, when the disciples were together, with the doors locked for fear of the Jewish leaders, Jesus came and stood among them and said, peace be with you. After he said this, he showed them his hands and side, and the disciples were overjoyed when they saw the Lord. So again, we're going to pause right there. So this is another miraculous moment, but here's what we can't miss. Where the disciples were when Jesus came to meet them is not where Jesus told them to go. Go to Galilee, he said. But at the end of the day, they're huddled in a room in Jerusalem with the doors locked. And we get that, right? I mean, the chief priests had just crucified their rabbi, and now the body is missing. I'd be scared too, right? But Jesus shows up right where they are. However, as the story continues, there's one disciple who's not there when Jesus shows himself, and he refuses to believe the words of all of the others, and that's where he sometimes picks up this nickname, Doubting Thomas. And so Jesus is going to come and meet the disciples again. Look at verse number 24. So we're still in the same chapter, but verse number 24. It says, now Thomas, also known as Didymus, one of the 12, was not with the disciples when Jesus came. So the other disciples told him, we have seen the Lord. But he said to them, unless I see the nail marks in his hands and put my finger where the nails were and put my hand into his side, I will not believe. A week later, his disciples were in the house again. And Thomas was with them. And though the doors were locked, Jesus came and stood among them and said, peace be with you. Then he said to Thomas, put your finger here, see my hands, reach out your hand, put it into my side, stop doubting and believe. Okay, so again, this is this overwhelming moment. Jesus shows up in the middle of his disciples, but did you catch where they were? They were in the house again. The same house in Jerusalem with the same locked doors 8 days later. They had been told to go to Galilee, and they refuse. But Jesus meets them right where they are. Finally, if you're still in the book of John, as we get to the beginning of chapter 21, they finally make their way to Galilee. The disciples eventually get there. And this is a familiar place. If you know the Gospels, it's where Peter and James and John and Andrew, where they grew up and where Jesus called them to follow him. We're not going to read all of them, but in these early verses of John chapter 21, we will read how the disciples fished all night and they didn't catch anything. And then Jesus is on the shore and he says, hey, put your nets on the other side. And they do, and a miraculous haul of fish. And then they realize it's Jesus. And Peter jumps out of the boat and he starts to make his way to shore. And once everybody gets to shore, Jesus has a breakfast of fish all laid out for them. But I want you to look with me at verse 14. John chapter 21 and verse number 14. It says this was now the third time Jesus appeared to his disciples after he was raised from the dead. The third time the resurrected Jesus has now come to his disciples, but it's the first time in Galilee. Why was it so important for Jesus to tell his disciples to meet him in Galilee? And I'll tell you this, it had nothing to do with geography. It had everything to do with obedience. Galilee is where they were told to go. Because while they didn't know this, Jesus did. Galilee is where restoration was waiting and where their stories would begin to be rewritten. Especially for Peter. Because let's keep reading in John 21. Look at verse 15. It says, when they had finished eating, Jesus said to Simon Peter, Simon, son of John, do you love me more than these? Well, yes, Lord, he said, you know that I love you. Jesus said, feed my lambs. Again, Jesus said, Simon, son of John, do you love me? He answered, yes, Lord, you know that I love you. Jesus said, take care of my sheep. The third time he said to him, Simon, son of John, do you love me? And Peter was hurt because Jesus asked him the third time, do you love me? He said, Lord, you know all things. You know that I love you. Jesus said, feed my sheep. And then Jesus says something strange, and we're going to read it. It says, very truly I tell you, when you were younger, you dressed yourself and went where you wanted. But when you are old, you will stretch out your hands and someone else will dress you and lead you where you do not want to go. And then we find out why he said this. Jesus said this to indicate the kind of death by which Peter would glorify God. And then this is so important. Then he said to him, follow me. There's a lot to unpack in those verses there, but here's what we may or may not fully grasp. Is that in those verses that we just read, Jesus just restored and reinstated Peter as one of his disciples. And here's the good news. Because the resurrection doesn't just rewrite the ending of our story. Like, all right, I've lived a horrible life, but because of Jesus, at least I get to go to heaven when I die. That's not the point of the resurrection. The resurrection reclaims what we thought was ruined in our story. You remember the message that was given by the angels at the tomb? Go tell his disciples and Peter. How strange. Peter is one of his disciples, right? Well, we have to keep in mind what happened on the night Jesus was arrested. Although Jesus had warned Peter, Peter denied even knowing his rabbi on 3 separate occasions. We read that, and to us, well, Peter was just deflecting because he was scared, and like we totally understand that. I don't really, yeah. We lie so easily. But to a Jew, Peter had turned his back on one of the most important relationships that existed, rabbi and disciple. Imagine in our culture, a woman who was wrongly sentenced to death, and her husband is out watching it all take place, and someone walks up and says, hey, isn't that your wife? And he's like, no. I don't know who that woman is, but wait, haven't you been married to her and lived with her for years and years? I don't know who that woman is. We would sit in gall like, how could you turn your back on the one you love? That is what a Jew would think when they read this story of Peter turning his back on his rabbi. The relationship between disciple and rabbi was that strong. See, Peter did not just simply deny Jesus, he disgraced Jesus. And because of that, Peter knew, and so did everyone else, there's no way Jesus would let him continue as one of his disciples. And yet, we just read Jesus asking Peter 3 times, do you love me? And each time that he says, yes, Lord, I love you, Jesus instructs him to take care of the flock, feed my lambs, care for the flock, feed my sheep. And what we cannot miss is that Jesus provided Peter with 3 opportunities to express his love, the same number of times he denied his relationship with Jesus. So in this moment, Jesus forgives Peter, he reinstates him, and he invites him to follow again. And if he says yes, he commissions him as a shepherd, just like the good shepherd, Jesus himself. You see, the risen Jesus was rewriting the story of this disciple that he loved. Peter had disgraced Jesus. Jesus offers Peter grace. Peter had abandoned Jesus. Jesus offers relationship. Peter had lost his place, and Jesus offered restoration. And just when we would all think that Peter's story was over, the resurrected Jesus shows up to rewrite that story. And I know you may be sitting out there thinking, like, this is a really strange sermon for Resurrection Sunday. Like, why aren't you talking about the tomb, the empty tomb? Like, I think that's what the empty tomb is all about. It's about the risen Jesus, because the empty tomb shows us that Jesus is not waiting for us to get our lives in order. He's alive and pursuing us to bring order into our lives. Like, how easy would it have been for Jesus to say, I've spent 3 years with you. I tried to warn you and you dismissed me. Then you ran away from me. And then someone told you what to do and you completely dismissed my instructions. You just don't get it. I'm done with you. But that's not what Jesus did. Instead, he asked Peter a simple question. Peter, do you love me? And as many times as Peter had failed, Jesus gave him that many times to respond. And when he did, his call remained the same. Follow me. I read that and I'm like, wow, what a gracious King Jesus is. Because I don't know about you, but when I look at Peter's failures, all I see is me. How long have I walked with Jesus? And yet, how often have I dismissed his warnings? How many times have I skipped out on Jesus, even denying to the world that I might know him? How many times have I just shrugged off his very clear instructions to me? And yet, for every time I have abandoned him, Jesus offers an equal chance to be restored. And he never withholds his grace, and he never tires of welcoming me home. And that is good news. So many people in the world, probably some even sitting at home today, thinking, maybe I should have gone, but I don't deserve it. Maybe I can't. Convincing ourselves that Jesus wants nothing to do with us until we clean ourselves up. And it's just wrong. Jesus wants everything to do with you. It's not about you cleaning yourself up. That's his job. He'll clean you up. He wants you to answer one question. Do you love me? I'm so proud. There's a young man in our congregation that I got a chance to talk with this week, and his friends, he really wants them to know God. And he mentioned that some of them are asking good but hard questions. Does God love me? Would God love me if I'm same-sex attracted? And I told him, well, the only people God has to love are sinners. Right? We're all sinners. Right? We're good on that. We're all sinners. So who else does Jesus have to love? We may feel that God doesn't love us, but that's not what his word says. His word says, for God so loved the world that he gave his only son. And in Romans, we read, and this is how God demonstrated his love to us, in that while we were still sinners, in case you missed that, while we were still sinners, Christ died for us. So see, we don't need to ask, I'm a sinner, does Jesus love me? Yes. But what we do need to ask is, do I love Jesus? Do I love Jesus enough to live the way that he asks me to live? Do I love Jesus enough to bring my passions and my desires and my life under his kingship? This means, and this is good news, that the only barrier to enjoying a relationship with Jesus is not whether he can love this sinner, but whether this sinner will love him. If you're here today and your past is filled with shame and guilt, maybe even some that no one else knows about, I promise you, whatever you're thinking about is not a barrier for a relationship with Jesus. He is not standing with his hands on his hips. Think about what Jesus was doing on the shore while Peter and his buddies were out there fishing. He was helping them accomplish what they were trying to do. He was providing for them. You got nothing? Throw your nets on the other side. And once your nets are filled, come on up to shore because I'm going to fill your bellies. Or do we get it? Jesus is not waiting for us to bring him anything. That empty tomb shows us he's already pouring out his grace to give us everything. I just think it's so cool that Jesus brought Peter and his disciples back to Galilee, because you know why? That was the same place that it all began. In fact, he not only gave him the same calling at the same place, he did the same miracle. Were you here when we read through Mark 1 and Peter had been out all night fishing and they didn't have anything? Jesus says, try it one more time. And he goes out and he throws his nets. And in the same place where he caught nothing, his nets are so full, they begin to break. They get to the shore and Jesus says, follow me. And we see it all over again. It's almost like Jesus wanted to remind Peter, and he wants to remind us who are trying to follow him, that he didn't choose us because we have what he needs. Jesus chose us because he is what we need. Like, it's no accident that Jesus brought Peter back to Galilee. It's the same shore, the same miracle, the same call, because Jesus knew, I've got to get him back to Galilee because he's going to run away from his calling, and I want to restore him in the same place where it all started. I just love that. It is the grace of God that brings us back to where we need to be, and it's not about a place. It's about a person. He brings us, the grace of God brings us back to Jesus. You may be here today like, oh, you don't know me, Brian. I've let Jesus down so many times. Hey, join the crowd. We're all in that parade, right? Actually, that thought that I've let Jesus down is buying into a false narrative. Because we assume we've let Jesus down, but that assumes that we were holding him up. And we don't hold Jesus up. He holds us up. And that goes for whether you rolled out of the crib into a nursery at a church and you've been attending church your entire life, or if you walked in today hungover from last night and this is your first time ever entering into a church. We all need Jesus the same. Like we all have to come to the same person at the same cross and ask for the same forgiveness and the same mercy, because the only hope anyone in the world has is Jesus. It's the religious crowd needs Jesus. The rebellious crowd needs Jesus, because Jesus is the only way. Like we don't get to Jesus by like packing up all of our good works and say like, hey, look what I have for you, Jesus. We get the kingdom of God when we follow the King of God. I met with a man a few weeks ago just in a coffee shop here in Plymouth, and I asked him a question that I love to ask people all the time. And if you've never seen this question before, I'd love for you to consider it. If God were to meet you outside the gates of heaven one day and say, hey, like, why should I let you into my kingdom? How do you answer that question? So I asked this man, we were sitting again at a coffee shop, and I asked him this question, and man, you should have seen the look on his face. His face falls very quickly, and he just kind of shakes his head, and without even looking at me, he goes, I would have to tell God that I don't deserve it. And then he looked up at me, and I think he was expecting like, yeah, you're a pretty bad person. Like, I think that's what he was expecting me to say, and I just had a smile on my face. And I could tell this quizzical look came over him. I'm like, you understand why I'm smiling? Like, that's not what anybody that I talk to says. When I ask people why, what they would say if God says, why should I let you into my kingdom? Most people say, well, I've been a pretty good person. And like, I've done these good things. And like, this is somehow we've convinced ourselves that we have something to offer God. And I showed him Titus chapter 3 that says we're not saved by the righteous things that we've done. We're saved by mercy. And mercy is what happened when Jesus went to that cross and he suffered the penalty for the sin we deserve. And then I took him to Ephesians chapter 2 and I said, the Bible tells us by grace that we've been saved, and it's not our works. And grace is when Jesus takes off his perfect righteous robes. He did everything right, and he drapes them over our shoulders. And so we could stand before the Father in the perfection of Jesus. That is grace. And mercy and grace, they're only found in Jesus. That mercy is undeserved. The grace is a gift. And it only comes from God, which tells me Jesus isn't asking us to impress him. He's inviting us to receive him. If there was one thing that Jesus is waiting for us to bring, I would say it would be our emptiness. Because that's what he longs to fill. Now, if you're here today and you're feeling empty, I'm going to tell you the answer is not to bundle up all the good that you're going to do, or maybe that you hope one day that you'll do, and bring it to Jesus and say, like, is this enough? No, the answer isn't to show Jesus what you have. The answer is to come to Jesus for what he has. With empty hands, saying, I can't, but I know you can. Because here's the thing. Jesus is not waiting for us to get it right. Because we won't. But through his Spirit, Jesus is transforming us to be right. And I realize in a crowd like this, it's likely that there's someone in this room and you don't have a relationship with Jesus where you follow him as your king. But I hope you consider that before you leave today. There's so much that Jesus has to offer. But for those who do know Jesus, I want to encourage you today with the same words that we shared last week. The same Spirit that raised Jesus from the dead lives in you. You know what that means? That means whatever you think is dead in your life can live again. If that Spirit raised Jesus from the dead, it can do the same for you. A marriage that seems dead can find new life. A broken heart can be restored. A family can find healing. Addiction can be overcome because Jesus longs to rewrite our stories. You see, what was dead in our lives can live again because the same Spirit that raised Jesus from the dead is alive in us. And if Jesus can keep the promise that I'm going to die and in 3 days rise again, tell me what promise he's made that he can't keep. I mean, we come back to this resurrection and we say, if that's what he can do, he can rewrite any part of my story. It may look different than what you think, though. You see, the Spirit in you rewriting your story, it may be giving you the power to say no to sin. It's not like he's going to pull it out. He's going to give you the power to say no to the sin you just can't say no to. Or it's the Spirit of God inside of you that's going to give you the power to say yes to that area of your life you have refused to surrender. Or he may be rewriting your marriage by giving you the power to simply say, I'm sorry. Or to say, you're forgiven. But the power is there. Let's be honest. We all live this disgraced story of Peter to some degree. We've all dismissed, we've all ran away, we've all denied, disobeyed, disappointed Jesus. We've all done that time and time again. But Jesus is not waiting to talk about the past. Did he bring that up to Peter? He asked him one question. Right now, Peter, in this moment here, do you love me? Because if you do, the one who turned death into life is ready to rewrite your story. And Peter becomes one who takes the gospel all over the world. Some of you may be here today running from Jesus, hiding behind locked doors, embarrassed of fear and failure. And here's what I want you to know. Just like he did with the disciples, he already stepped into the room with you. He's here right now. And he invites you to know that he's real. Some of you showed up today and your life, you would have to admit, is empty. You have been grasping for fulfillment all over the place in your career, with your money, with sex, with drugs, with alcohol. And it is every time you reach for it, it comes up empty. And what Jesus is saying is, I know where the fish are. I know where to cast your net, but you're going to have to listen to me. But I'm ready to fill you anytime you want. And honestly, some of us may have failed him so many times. But he's going to ask you, as many times as you failed him, he's going to ask you this one question. But do you love me now? Will you follow me today? Because Jesus didn't rise from the dead just to prove a point. He walked out of that tomb to rewrite our stories. And the beauty of the resurrection is not just that Jesus came back to life. It's that he came back for us. And if you're ready to turn to the risen King, what you'll find, he's already in pursuit of you. That's why he's living again. Would you pray with me? With your heads bowed and your eyes closed, I'm just going to ask if you would just take some time to just simply, I really want you to respond to Jesus today. And here's what I'm going to ask you to do. Would you, in your mind's eye, would you go back to the place where Jesus first met you? Maybe it was a Sunday school class. Maybe it was a bedroom in your house. Maybe it was like at a coffee shop where you met someone. Where did you meet Jesus for the first time? And imagine that he wants to lead you back there right now. So many things are different. So many circumstances in your life have changed. You really feel like a different person. You're probably embarrassed of some of the ways that you failed Jesus, but I want you to picture him with a smile on his face. And he's sitting in that room with you again. He's kneeling at that altar with you again. He's back in that Sunday school class or in your bed. He's right back there one more time. And he's smiling, and he simply looks at you with this one question. Hey, my friend. Hey, my child. Do you love me today? We don't need to talk about the past. We don't need to talk about the failures. Just right now, do you love me? Will you say yes to following me again? Because if you will, I'll take all your sin and your shame and disgrace. I've done that at the cross. If you just give it to me, and I'm here to fill you with everything that I have to offer you. I know there's places in your life that are empty. I know you're trying so hard to run after it all, and you're just missing the fulfillment. I have that fulfillment. I have it for you. I have it. And I know the words that we want to say is, yeah, but Jesus, I've wandered far in my relationship. And he said, we're right here, right now, though. Do you love me? Lord, you know that I love you. Oh, but no, let's pause. Do you love me? Oh, Lord, you know that no, right now, in this moment. Do you love me? And will you say yes to following me again? I want to pray for you. I would wonder if there's anybody who might have said, you know what, Brian, I've wandered far in my relationship with Jesus. I'll be honest, I've wandered, but I want it back. And I want to display my love for Jesus. I would love to pray for you if that's you. And I would never embarrass you, but could you just, with your heads bowed, eyes closed all around, would you just slip up a hand real quick like, hey, Brian, pray for me. I'm that person that's wandered far. Thank you so much. Is there anybody? Thank you. Is there anybody? Thank you. You can put your hands right back down as soon as you, thank you. Man, that's great. Is there anyone else? I've wandered in my relationship. I want it back. Thank you. Is there anybody today and you'd be like, Brian, I feel empty. But I've been that person that has just been running after everything to fill my life. And the reality is I haven't turned to Jesus, but I know that's what I need more than anything. Hey, Brian, pray for me that in my emptiness that I'll turn to Jesus to fill me. Is there anyone like that? I want to pray for you too. Just slip up a hand, slip back down. I've been running after all kinds of things other than Jesus. Thank you so much. Anybody else? Thank you. Thank you. What a blessing. I've been running after things, but I have not been running after Jesus. I promise you this, if you turn and look to go after him, you're going to find that he's right there with you. And then I wonder if there's just anybody here and you say, hey, Brian, I realize I've been doing this all on my own. I don't even have a relationship with Jesus. I really thought it was my good works that would get me into the kingdom. I've never really placed my faith and trust in who Jesus is, but today I want to follow him. I want Jesus as a part of my life. I want him to be my king. I want to follow wherever he asks me to go. Is there anybody like that today? I'd love to pray for you as well. Hey, Brian, that'd be me. I need Jesus in my life. He's not a part of my life, but I need him. Is there anyone like that? Would you just raise a hand and I could pray for you? Awesome. As we sit here, I just really want to give you a moment to have this conversation with Jesus. When he asks, do you love me? How would you respond? What's your answer to that? He's not asking how far you have fallen. He's not asking how far you've wandered, how many times. No. Do you love me? And then before I close in prayer, I want you to take just a few moments and I want you to listen to what Jesus wants to say back to you. Do you love me? Well, yes, Lord, I love you. Then what's he telling you to do? What's he asking from you? What is he bringing to your attention that you need to give him? Father, today is a day that we celebrate the work that Jesus Christ did for us. And we also get to celebrate the work that Jesus is doing in us as he rewrites our stories. Even the song that we sang at the beginning of the service today that we're going to sing again in just a moment, that death was arrested. It's a song that tells, it's that story of what Jesus has done for us, that he didn't just come back and defeat the grave. He defeated sin so that he could restore us, so that he could remake us, so that we could become new creatures. But we just have to answer that question. Do you love me? Do you love me? Father, we know your love for us. And we rejoice in how much you have cared for us. Thank you for loving us unconditionally. Lord, may we respond. Despite who we are, despite how we've let you down, may we simply respond. Yes, I will follow you. Wherever you go, wherever you lead, whatever you ask, whatever that means, because you are my risen Savior. We praise you. We love you. We exalt you, Jesus. In your name, amen and amen.